Guys, I'm Leaf Lusts and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about Calatheas and all the different varieties that they have, and also talk about the care and propagation of them. So we're going to start with this Calathea here. So this is a Calathea Maranta, and you can tell by the beautiful deep green glossy leaves and the pink pinstripes, which probably are a bit hard to make out on the camera, but it is a really gorgeous plant. They can grow really large as well, as you can probably see by this one here. It's pretty massive. I did buy this one quite large from a local plant shop, but it has grown hugely and given me some really nice big leaves, which are way bigger than my head. So it's a really beautiful statement plant. So to start off, we're going to discuss why Calatheas. So Calatheas are often thought of as a very difficult plant to look after. There's a lot of information if you go onto sort of Facebook plant groups, but also on Instagram, as painting Calatheas as almost like a devil plant. They can be very dramatic, it is true, but I do think that it is much easier to look after Calatheas than a lot of people make out. They were actually one of my first plants that I started off with. Some would describe that as a baptism of fire, but I do actually think that it taught me a huge amount about plants in a very short period of time. And I must have done okay, because I still have all of those Calatheas that started my journey, and they're all doing pretty well. So I'm going to take you through my collection and talk about the different care that I give each Calathea, and any added boosts, and also big no-nos as well, because there are a few of them. Things to watch out for, pests that Calatheas are more likely to get than potentially other plants, and also some care advice for them. We will look at propagation, and I may also touch on Marantas. Although technically a different genus, they are very similar plants. Actually used to be part of the Calathea family until not that long ago, so I think it's quite relevant that I mention those within this as well, because they do have very similar care advice. So as I said, we'll start off with my Calathea ornata. So one thing that Calatheas are very prone to is this. This is the sort of browning and crisping on the side of the leaves. This can be due to a number of reasons. On mine, I actually know exactly what the reason is for this lovely crispy bit, and that is because I put it too close to the window the other day and I burnt it. Bad plant mum. But you can see that they generally are quite healthy when you don't put them too close to the window. So I tend to keep mine in nice shaded areas within my bedroom. So I've actually, right behind me here is where I keep this ornata. It's out of direct light because it's to the side of the window, and there's no other windows pointed at it, but there's a lot of ambient light in the room from the 3 huge windows that I have in here. So she does get decent amounts of light. I do try and give her some time to sunbathe every now and again by putting her up and raised at window level, but drawn back from the windows, as otherwise you get this really sexy leaf burn like I did the other day. So light, very important for them. They don't like loads of light. That is something I've learned. They don't want it completely shaded, but they definitely don't want direct sunlight, especially in summer when leaf burn is so prevalent. The other thing that most people talk about when they talk about Calatheas is humidity. Now, don't get me wrong, humidity is incredibly important for Calatheas to thrive, and I do think that it's definitely something that is needed to be discussed when we talk about Calatheas, but I also want to give some devil's advocate perspective on that. When I first started, I obviously didn't own a humidifier. I had absolutely no idea, to be perfectly honest, what my humidity was, how to measure it, that Calatheas even needed humidity. So I winged it, and it doesn't seem to go too badly. So now that I'm more established and I've got a lot more plants and a lot more knowledge, I do actually have a humidity monitor. So I know what the ambient humidity is in my room without a humidifier on or any other added things. So I actually find that my humidity averages around 50%, which is pretty good. I don't put my heating on in winter in my bedroom. I am at the top of the house, so heat does rise naturally, but I don't actually put the heating on because it dries out the atmosphere. So I find that that does help. My room stays sort of a reasonable temperature of around 20 to 25 degrees, depending on the time of year. Hopefully not 25 degrees too much, because that is hot. But it is usually around 20 degrees, so that seems to work perfectly well for them. Obviously, if you do want your Calatheas to do really, really, really well, humidity helps. It is a jungle plant, you can't get away from that. But the only way to do that isn't just having a humidifier. So I do have a humidifier, which I now use, but I've only started using this in the last few months. Before that, I was not using any humidifiers at all. I would mist, I would have a shower and leave the door open, and now and again I would bring them in to soak up all that showery goodness, but I did not do any more than that. So humidity, definitely a must, but they can do well without it, but they won't necessarily thrive. But this is all dependent on the humidity that is naturally in your home, which will vary from where you are to how your house is built to multiple other reasons. So if you are lucky enough to have quite a high humidity anyway at home, your Calatheas may do great. But one thing I would always suggest is buying a humidity monitor. I think that is really, really helpful. It has honestly done huge work for me, and really helped me understand my plants a lot better and why certain plants seem to do better for me without the use of a humidifier than other people. When I recently did a poll on my Instagram and found out that some people's natural humidity in their rooms is as low as 20%. So obviously a Calathea is not going to be able to do well in those situations, whereas mine, where it averages around 50, it's going to do a lot better. So Calatheas. Next, we're going to talk about this baby. So this is my Calathea medallion. So I do have a bit of a problem with her every winter. She tends to go a little bit crispy, and I'm pretty sure that was due to the lack of humidity in the room. Now that we've fixed that and we have a much happier one thing that's really important with Calatheas is if a leaf isn't doing well, if it is crisped up, if it doesn't look healthy, remove it. That is like the number one rule, to be perfectly honest, of any plant, but Calatheas especially. I recently removed 5 leaves from this beautiful medallion that just weren't quite as beautiful as I'd like them to be. And to thank me, we currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new leaves coming through, and I've just had 2 unfurl. So don't be scared to prune, because honestly the plant will love you for it and it will grow those new leaves back really quickly. So top tip there. Pruning is not scary. It does feel horrible cutting it, don't get me wrong, I understand. But once you've done it, it will reward you and you'll get a much healthier, better and much more beautiful looking plant at the end of it. So one top tip done. Let's move it. Then here we have my Calathea lancefolia. So this, also known as a rattlesnake plant, as it's commonly called because of its beautiful rattlesnakey-like leaves, which I love, and that gorgeous red underside that's so often seen in Calatheas. This again does really well. I want to talk about potting soil when it comes to these guys. So a lot of people spend a huge amount of time and sometimes money getting their potting soil right for their plants. I don't think you always need to. With my Calatheas, I have all of them potted up in normal houseplant potting soil. And then I add in perlite. Aerates the soil. Seems to do a great job. None of them are complaining. I've got 3 new leaves coming up from this one at the moment. Oh no, 4. And I've just had a number of new leaves unfurl as well. So I must be doing something right there. This guy, again, doesn't sit in direct light because they don't like that, but does have enough ambient light to kickstart that growth, and it's doing great. I don't have any crispy leaves on this one because I was well behaved enough to keep it away from the windows on cleaning day when I accidentally left my ornata in the wrong place. But again, great. not too much light, enough that it can grow and photosynthesize, but no more than that. The other really important thing is, of course, dusting your leaves. So that is something that I think we're all guilty of every now and again, that we forget to do that. But it is really important, especially with the plants that aren't in bright sunlight all the time. They really need their leaves to photosynthesize, and if they're covered in dust, they're not going to be able to do that to the same ability. So next we're going to talk about this guy, which is my Calathea zebrina. Now, one thing you may note on this is, yes, crispy tips. This guy is honestly the worst when it comes to needing humidity. A lot of them can kind of cope with it. This one over here, for instance, my Lankifolia, totally fine. I don't need it anywhere near my humidifier. I barely missed it. Seems to be really happy. That's definitely one of the more hardy of the bunch. But this guy with its more velvety leaves is definitely more prone to crisping. I had it quite far away from my other plants, so it didn't have the benefit of the grouping of plants which causes the natural humidity in the air to rise. I now realise that was a mistake, and I want to share that with you so that you don't make the same mistake. I have now moved it. It's in a different position, tiny bit more light to help kickstart the growth, but also the other thing that I have remembered to now do is to turn it. So you may note that it looks really full from that side. And then there, not too bad. And then, oh, I forgot to turn it. If you do not turn your plants, you are going to have a bald spot like this. So I am now having to have my bald spot out on show, because I really want to encourage growth here. So it's now much happier. Now it's in its extra spot, and I'm getting loads of new leaves again, and they're kind of a mess of them. There's so many. I've actually had a lot of babies from this plant. They're really easy to propagate. So you've got this zebrina, you've got the Lankifolia, you've got the medallion, and the Rufibarbara. All of them tend to grow little pups at the sides. So you'll get sort of little stems that come off at a bit of a weird angle, and all you need to do is root division. It's really easy. You take a sharp knife that has been sterilised, very important. Make sure you sterilise your knife. Just literally run a lighter over it. Make sure it's nice and hot. It'll be fine. And chop. Just make sure you've got some decent roots on the system, and then pot it up. There will be some form of shock when you take the plant off often. Don't worry too much about that. I always pot them straight into soil and then pop them in a Ziploc bag, and they'll grow roots in no time, a full root system. And I've had, I think, 5 babies from this Calathea Rufibarbara and 3 from my zebrina, and all of them are thriving. They're all in new homes now and growing very nicely. So definitely don't be put off by the idea of root division. It's very different to what a lot of us are used to. We're used to sort of chopping it off at a node and popping it in some water or some moss or some soil to grow roots. But this is like even easier because they already have roots. So you don't actually have to go through that whole process. The only thing you need to get over is the division shock, which, as I say, can be easily rectified by popping it in a really high humidity environment like a Ziploc bag for a few weeks until it's perfectly happy again. So don't be put off propagating Calatheas. It's really not bad. It's very easy. So, as I said, we're going to run through the facts once more. Light, indirect, ambient, stick away from really bright hot windows because they will burn. Humidity, you want it at a decent level. Ideally, Calatheas will do their best at about 65%. My room time tends to vary between 55 to 70, and they're doing really well. I'm getting multiple new leaves on every single one of my Calatheas at the moment, so that's great. When it comes to positioning, Calatheas obviously are going to do better in more humid rooms. If you have, or are lucky enough to have, a bathroom with a window, which I'm not, pop them in there. They're going to thrive. They're going to do great in there. The humidity from showers will just help them go mad. But otherwise, mist them. Be careful when misting new leaves because sometimes you can get the moisture trapped in there and then they're going to rot. and just make sure that you're grouping those plants together to try and encourage the humidity as much as you physically can. Or if you have a humidifier, pop them by a humidifier for a couple of hours a day. Makes all the difference. And then we also want to talk about the potting soil. As I mentioned, all I use is perlite and normal soil. I tend to repot my Calatheas about once a year. It varies. The roots don't grow too mad on a Calathea. Realistically, you don't actually really need to repot that much unless they're growing like mad. So this guy here really outgrew its pot. It was very root bound and it was just going mad. So I've recently repotted it into a much bigger pot, and to thank me, it gave me loads of new leaves, and look how bushy it is. I mean, I bought this in a 12cm pot about 9 months ago, and look at it now. It's huge. So Calatheas can all grow really big as well, so that's another really fun thing about them. I honestly would like to reiterate once more that they are not that hard work, and do not be put off them. Start with something a bit easier like a Rufibarbara. Then work your way up to maybe the likes of the Ornata, which are A, more expensive, and B, harder to get right. But definitely start off with something like this. They're really cheap and they're not going to be too much of a risk for you. And I think you'll really enjoy them. Pests. When it comes to pests, the worst one for Calatheas, I say worst, but the most common that I've personally found for Calatheas are mealybugs. Mealybugs tend to pop up on my Calatheas more often than anything else, and they're annoying, but they're easily fixed. The minute you see a mealybug, quarantine the plant. Number 1. Number 2, wash those little fuckers off. I'm not supposed to swear. Oops. And then spray it. Spray the hell out of it. I personally use SB. It doesn't work for everything, and I'm not going to pretend it does, but I do find that it works every single time on mealybugs. I just spray the plant until it's dripping in it. I also actually use it on all of my Calatheas once a week as a preventative, and I have found that since doing that I haven't actually had any mealybug infestations at all, so that's really great. When it comes to watering them, I tend to water once a week. I do check at other times. I'm not a massive fan of people saying, oh, I'm on a specific watering schedule and I water X amount of times a week. It changes dependent on your environment. If it's very dry that week and very hot, you're obviously going to need to water more often than in the middle of winter when it's cold and damp and the plot doesn't dry out as fast. So it's going to vary over the year. So I give mine a check every couple of days and make sure you want the soil to be sort of moist but not damp, and you don't really want them to fully dry out because that does upset the plant and can cause, again, the crisping of the leaves. So watering inconsistencies is actually a really big problem for Calatheas. It can actually cause crisping and yellowing of leaves, and you want to make sure that you have quite a consistent routine with them. So you want to water when just before that point where they're completely dried out, and you want to keep doing it that way. If you keep changing up your style and maybe you let them completely dry out one week and then completely overwater them the next, which obviously we don't want to do with any of our plants, but with Calathea specifically, they're going to hate that. The other thing is underwatering. Calatheas are dramatic. They are known to be dramatic. I'm quite dramatic myself, so I feel them, I believe. But they will just go flop. A bit like a Fittonia or a nerve plant, you will note that some plants are overly dramatic when it comes to lack of water. So I have had on multiple occasions it look like this Rufibarbara is on its last legs and dying. And I have panicked and all of the leaves have fallen over and there's this giant hole in the middle of where you can see sunlight, and I've watered it and 2 hours later it looks like it never happened. So don't worry too much about things like that. They bounce back very quickly, but obviously it's something we'd rather avoid. But if it does happen, don't panic. It's not going to kill the plant, obviously, unless you've not watered it for like ages, and then it may kill the plant. Then finally, propagation. As I said, root division is really the only way that you can propagate a Calathea. They are very easy to do. Don't be put off it. Sharp knife, pop it straight into a little pot, shove it in a plastic bag, you're good to go. Last but not least, I want to discuss Marantas with you. So not technically the same genus anymore, but they used to be part of the same genus. So I wanted to show you, this is actually a cutting that I got about 5 months ago. No, less than that. About 3 months ago, just before lockdown. I got this, this is a 2-leaf cutting. Marantas grow fast. Look at it. It's huge and growing new leaves constantly. I think I've got about 5 coming through at the moment. So I've already repotted it. This is the second. I rooted it, then I put it in a 9cm pot, and now it's in a 12. It's growing like mad. It's doing really, really well, and it's really happy. The only thing I have done wrong is put it in too much light. Now that it's coming into summer, I need to draw it back from the window, because just like Calatheas, they get really bad sunburn. So anything like that, either just take off the leaf, which is exactly what I'm going to do. Just take it off. That didn't go too well, did it? Just take off the leaf and it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It happens to the best of us. And then when it comes to propagation, unlike Calatheas, you can propagate normally with Marantas. So this is from my fascinator. So you want to make sure that when you cut it under this node. So this is the node with the sort of leaf join here, and you get this little bump. And this is where our roots are going to come out of. So I've given it quite a long stem down here, which I didn't really need to do, but it was more the fact that I just wanted it to fit in a certain propagation pot. So just like that, just there, here, we want to make sure that we've got this sort of lighter bit that's coming down there. I'm dripping water all over the face. And then I've just literally popped it in some water. And they usually root pretty fast. They're very easy plants. They grow like weeds. But one of the reasons I'm doing that is because Marantas tend to grow out quite flat, especially the fascinator. They're ground coverers rather than sort of branches and bushes. And I want to bush out my plant. So I've started snipping off little bits of it to root and then push back in so that I create more of a bush-like plant, because at the moment it is a bit sparse in the middle, but very, very, very long. It is huge. They are very fast growers. They're very fun plants. I highly recommend getting a Maranta. They are also, I mean, who can say that's not beautiful? I mean, they're like little painted leaves. One thing that's really important, again, with Marantas is making sure it stays out of direct sunlight. I personally find that mine actually does best in the most shaded of spots. So I started off with indirect light with it, didn't like it. I then moved it to one of the shadiest spots in my room, and I was actually quite worried about it because I didn't think it would grow, and it has gone mad. It's been there for about 9 months now. It puts out at least a new leaf a week, even in the middle of winter. So pop it in a nice shady spot. It will flower for you. This one's just finished, but it has beautiful little purple flowers on it. Really easy to propagate, really beautiful. Again, water it about once a week. Obviously check the soil in between. It may need more, it may need less. Marantas very rarely need potting or repotting. I only did that one because it was in such a small pot beforehand and it was really outgrowing it. But usually, for instance, this guy has been in its pot now for about 18 months and it's really happy and it's not root bound. Everything's going fine. So leave it as it is. I do put a little bit of a top up of the soil on it every now and again to make sure it's still got some nutrients in it, and I also feed all of my Calatheas and Maranta about once every 2 weeks with a good liquid fertilizer. I do recommend something like liquid gold leaf, which I'm sure so many of you are fans of. So yeah, that's basically it. So I just want to say goodbye from me and all of my Calathea / Maranta babies, and thank you so much for watching. And if you do have any questions about Calathea care, Maranta care, propagation, or anything else, please feel free to message me on Instagram. My Instagram is @leaf_lusts, and I'd be really happy to answer any questions.